While World War I was fought in European trenches, it functioned as an acute economic shock that destabilized the Indian subcontinent. The British Empire relied heavily on its colonies for manpower, and forced recruitment in rural villages created widespread anger as men were drafted into the war effort. To finance defense expenditure, the British government introduced income tax and war loans, doubling the price of basic goods between 1913 and 1918. Simultaneously, consecutive crop failures swept India. The 1921 census recorded 13 million deaths resulting from the accompanying famines and influenza epidemic. These hardships did not end when the war was over. The persistence of this economic and human toll created a demand for a different type of leadership and a new way of organizing resistance. In January 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India from South Africa, where he had successfully led a mass movement against a racist regime. He brought with him a specific method of agitation called satyagraha. He defined this not as physical force, but as an insistence on truth. Satyagraha emphasized that if the cause was true and the struggle was against injustice, physical force was not necessary to defeat an oppressor. It was a pure soul force that rejected the label of passive resistance. The method operated by appealing to the conscience of the adversary. By choosing nonviolence, a satyagrahi sought to persuade the oppressor to see the truth, rather than forcing them to accept it through violence. Gandhi believed that this specific dharma of nonviolence could act as a unifying force, bringing together the many different groups within Indian society. By treating truth as a weapon, satyagraha offered a way to confront colonial infrastructure through moral authority rather than military strength. Before attempting a movement on a national scale, Gandhi applied these methods to resolve local grievances. In 1917, he traveled to Champaran, Bihar, to support peasants forced by European landowners to grow indigo under an oppressive system of low prices and high demands. The government responded by arresting Gandhi, but the resulting public pressure led to his release and eventual amendments to the law that improved the peasants' situation. Later that year, he turned to Kheda, Gujarat. Here, a crop failure and a plague epidemic had made it impossible for farmers to pay their revenue, but the government refused to relax its tax demands. Under Gandhi's guidance, Sardar Patel organized the farmers to withhold revenue until their demands for relief were met. In 1918, Gandhi intervened in a third dispute in Ahmedabad, where cotton mill workers were striking for higher wages and bonuses following a devastating monsoon and epidemic. These campaigns involved three very different groups: peasants, farmers, and urban industrial workers. In each case, the method of non-violent agitation resulted in concessions from both landowners and the colonial state. In 1919, the British government passed the Rowlatt Act. It was pushed through the Imperial Legislative Council despite the united opposition of every Indian member. The act gave the government enormous powers to repress political activities, allowing the detention of political prisoners for up to 2 years without a trial. The tension peaked on April 13th in Amritsar. A massive crowd gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh. Some were there to protest the act, but many were villagers attending a local fair, unaware that the government had banned public gatherings. General Dyer entered the area, blocked the exits, and ordered his troops to fire on the crowd, killing hundreds. He later explained that his aim was to produce a moral effect, to create a feeling of terror and awe in the minds of the satyagrahis. The violence at Jallianwala Bagh shifted the nature of the struggle. It was no longer a matter of local disputes. The brutality of the response pushed Gandhi to launch a nationwide movement of non-cooperation. The non-cooperation movement of 1921 saw thousands of students leave government schools and the burning of foreign cloth in massive bonfires. By 1922, the import of foreign cloth had halved in its total value. While the movement united under the slogan of Swaraj, or self-rule, the term was interpreted very differently across Indian society. In Awadh, peasants viewed Swaraj as the end of high rents and unpaid labor. In the Gudam Hills, tribal peasants believed Swaraj meant an end to colonial forest laws that prevented them from grazing cattle, leading them to launch a militant guerrilla movement. For tea plantation workers in Assam, Swaraj meant the right to move freely. They defied the Inland Emigration Act, which prevented them from leaving their Gordons without permission. Believing that Gandhi Raj was coming, thousands of workers left the plantations for their home villages. However, they were stranded by a railway strike and caught by the police, who beat them brutally. In February 1922, Gandhi withdrew the entire movement after a peaceful demonstration in Chauri Chaura turned into a violent clash. He realized that the movement was becoming a collection of separate struggles rather than a trained, unified force. Non-cooperation had reached its limit because it lacked a single focus. To challenge the empire again, the movement needed a symbol that could unite these separate interests into one national demand. Resistance intensified in 1928 when the British sent the Simon Commission to India. Because it was an all-British commission with no Indian members, it was met with mass protests from every political party. In early 1930, Gandhi sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. These covered everything from the interests of industrialists to the grievances of the peasantry. The demand that resonated most across the entire country was the call to abolish the salt tax. Salt was consumed by the rich and the poor alike and was a basic necessity of life. By focusing on the government's monopoly over its production, Gandhi could illustrate the oppressive nature of British rule to every citizen. He began a 240-mile march from his ashram in Sabarmati to the coastal town of Dandi. Accompanied by 78 volunteers, the group walked for 24 days, gathering thousands of supporters at every stop. On April 6th, Gandhi reached the coast and manufactured salt by boiling seawater. This act of breaking the law moved the nation beyond non-cooperation and into a state of active civil disobedience. By selecting a universal necessity like salt, Gandhi provided a single focus for the movement. Across India, people began manufacturing their own salt and demonstrating in front of government factories. Despite the unity shown during the Salt March, political leaders remained divided over how a future Indian state should be structured. At the second Roundtable Conference, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar clashed with Gandhi over the issue of political representation for Dalits. Ambedkar demanded separate electorates to ensure Dalit interests were protected. Gandhi argued that this would permanently divide the population and prevent their integration into the broader society. The conflict was eventually settled through the Pune Pact of 1932. Ambedkar accepted a unified electorate in exchange for reserved seats for the depressed classes in provincial and central legislative councils. Parallel to these political negotiations, a sense of national identity was being built through new symbols. Just as Germania represented Germany, the image of Bharat Mata, first painted by Abanindranath Tagore, began to represent the Indian nation. This sense of belonging was not a pre-existing condition. It was something that had to be negotiated through local protests, universal symbols like salt, and the difficult, ongoing debate over how a diverse population could become a single nation.